Hello, everyone. Today we are talking about motivation. And really, we're talking about what brought you here. Why did you click on this video? Why are you learning about motivation? Why do you go to school, go to work? Why do you even get out of bed in the morning? All right. So our definition says that motivation is the reason or the reasons, there can be more than one, that a person has for acting or behaving in a particular way. Motivation is a huge component when we talk about business leadership because that's pretty much exactly what business leadership is. Business leadership is trying to motivate people in a business to do what you need them to do. Okay, whether that is their job, whatever their job is, in a particular way. Okay, so how do we get them to do that? We need to motivate them. All right, and so it really, really is a foundational component of business leadership, and everything that we look at is going to come back to this concept. So if you're following along, we've touched a little bit on personality and how everybody internally is a little bit different, how we process information, how we make decisions for our lives. And while that is true, and it does need to be taken into consideration, when we talk about motivation, we do talk a little bit generically. There are multiple different theories of motivation, just like there's multiple different theories in a lot of different areas. Scientists have taken time to study human behavior and what motivates humans. All right, and so today we are going to start with the most popular theory to get us going on this concept of motivation, and then in other lessons we can talk about some other ones there. And that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's pretty hard to get through high school in Ontario, Canada, let alone university, without hearing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All right. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was developed by Abraham Maslow, along with a team of other individuals who often don't get very much credit, as is per our history. Who was a psychologist, an author, and a university professor. All right. Just like a lot of other older theories, there is some controversy around Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and a little bit about the way that kind of the research was initially conducted. However, there have been a number of studies since then that have corroborated the overall concepts that we are talking about here. And the thing that I just want to point out and remind you from those controversies, because it's very important that we learn from them, is that not everybody is the exact same. Okay, so we are taking a moment with this theory to generalize and make assumptions about everybody. We know everybody's not the same. They all do have different personalities, and at different times of our lives, we might have different levels of needs. But this is kind of a starting point, a really great starting point to understand motivation, and it's one of the theories that helps us define it. I also want to mention here that this concept in theory is very much based off of very European culture of individualism. And we recognize that there's lots of cultures in the world who are not centered around that. And so as we get into culture and understandings later in the course, we're going to see the complexities that come out of that. So again, I just wanted to mention that, again, whenever we simplify, there's elements that get excluded. Finally, I also want to mention the indigenous roots of the work that was done here. There's been a number of studies and proof that have come out recently that Maslow, when he was stuck partway through working through this community in Alberta, Canada, actually went and spent a lot of time with a number of indigenous communities, specifically the Blackfoot region and communities, and learned from them and what he believed and is quoted to say is one of the most civilized communities that he's ever been a part of. And unfortunately, they don't often get the recognition. They don't very ever get the recognition that they need for this white European man coming and taking a lot of those theories and running with it. So I just wanted to take that moment to recognize that contribution that's there and how much we can learn from those communities. Okay, basically, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is this triangle right here. Okay, and what it says is we have different categories of needs as human beings. So let's take a look at this triangle and what all is included, and then we'll talk about how we use it. So at the very bottom of our triangle is our physiological needs. That is the big fancy word for the things that go on in our bodies that keep us alive. All right. we are highly motivated to stay alive, if that makes sense. Okay. And so the things that we need to stay alive include breathing, include basic levels of eating, water, includes sleep, it includes excretion, and basic bodily and human functions. All right. Above that, that next category is looking at safety needs. Okay. So we often talk about safety as in security and safety. Okay. And this can be of your body, this can be of your employment, this can be of your resources, this can be of your family, your health, your property, your concept of morality. And it's really important to note with safety, there is this difference, and it does need to be included here between actual safety and perceived safety. Okay. So again, somebody might say, hey, Miss King, you have 4 deadbolt locks on your front door. You are safe. Okay. But if for whatever reason something has happened in my life, that means I'm not going to be able to sleep at night because I do not feel safe, then those are 2 very, very different things. And they both are included in this category. We need to actually be safe and actually feel safe. All right. From harm. Above that, we have loving and belonging. So as humans, we crave connection, okay? Social connection. And that can be from friends, that can be from family, that can be from like social connections, that can be intimacy, whether that's just through thought and feeling and sharing, or sexual intimacy as well. All right. And so that is looking for those connections there. Okay. Above that is what we call our esteem category. This includes our own confidence in ourselves, our own belief in our own achievements, and confidence in our ability to achieve things. This very much comes from other people respecting us, acknowledging our successes and our achievements. And we know that people crave that because a lot of our society is built around that. We have award shows to recognize the best movies, or we have the Olympics to find the best athletes. All right. We crave that recognition of an achievement. All right. And then finally, at the very top is something called self-actualization. This is a level that not a lot of humans get to, and they generally don't stay here super long. Okay. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but this is very much almost a lack of those other things. We're no longer craving any of the things below it. So we're able to live beyond other people's thoughts about us and prejudice. We're able to accept facts as they are. We're able to be spontaneous and solve problems. And that would be what that upper level looks like. All right. But let's dive in a little bit about what this has to do with motivation. So we can maybe see or relate in our own lives how at different times we've maybe been motivated by different things. Okay. Why was I willing to get up at a karaoke place and sing a song off key? Well, maybe I was craving friendship and social connection, and that was something that my friend group was doing. And so I was willing to kind of make a fool of myself in order to do that. Okay. Why did I just spend a whole bunch of money on a floodlight for the front of my house? Well, that is going to give me a perceived sense of safety and security. Okay. Why did I stay at work a lot more hours than I needed to? Okay, well, maybe I was really working towards, like a promotion or employee of the week or something like that. And so that would be me craving those esteem recognition. So we can maybe recognize that each of these different things might have motivated us or those around us in our lives. But how does the theory actually work? Okay, and this is very, very important. The first thing in it is called the deficit principle. And what this means is that we are not motivated by satisfying one of these categories. We act and are motivated by the things that we don't have. Okay? So a lot of theories before Maslow's came about said that if we can make sure that our employees, they didn't use this terminology, but physiological needs are met. All right. They have enough money to eat. They get to sleep. They're rested. They have water. Then they're going to be happy humans and they're going to work hard. Okay. Maslow says that's not true. Okay. We are motivated to get the things we don't have. And so once we have everything in this category, that's not what's motivating us anymore. All right. The other one is that it's a progression principle. We cannot care or be motivated by things higher up in the triangle until the ones at the bottom are met. All right. So again, if we think back, we will be fully motivated by finding food and water. Okay, we will not care about love and belonging, or we will not care about esteem or an employee of the month plaque if we're not going to have food on our table at the end of the day. We have to have that bottom tier fully satisfied before we will be motivated by the tier above it. All right. And so while we're saying, okay, if an employee has all their physiological needs met, they're not going to be motivated by that. But what that does mean is once all their physiological needs are met, that bottom tier is good, they're now going to be motivated by a sense of security. They're going to be motivated by that next one that they're missing. And then if they're able to achieve and get all of that, then they're going to be motivated by love and belonging and friendship and social connection. And if they have all of that in their life, then they're going to be motivated by those esteem needs. Okay. And this is really, really important when we look at these levels. Okay. Because some people will have a basic understanding of Maslow's hierarchy and say, okay, we need to put employee of the month in. Okay, I always find it really ironic when we see an employee of the month program at like a minimum wage place like Walmart. Okay, unfortunately, a lot of their employees do not have the bottom three tiers of their Maslow's hierarchy met. And so they're not motivated by an employee of the month. They're not there yet. We always default down to the bottom one. And so if you're not paying enough for somebody to be able to keep their family fed and healthy, and especially in the US, get the medical attention that they need, they're not going to care about those other things. That is the only thing that's going to be motivating them. All right. So with those principles in mind, let's look at a little situation. And this can maybe help us understand what has motivated people to do things that maybe we didn't necessarily agree with in the past and or in the present. Okay, so a really big example in our lives was COVID. Okay, and in Canada, there was such a huge debate about sending kids back and when we do that. All right, so for September 2021, huge debate. They need to be back in person. How dare you want them to be back in person? Okay, people were fully divided. And while they may not have been communicating well because of their personalities being different, and we talked again in our previous lessons about how you present facts to people might be different based off of their personality. Okay. In this case, we're going to look at their motivation behind it. Okay. So we're going to specifically look at, in my neighborhood, this one blew up. Okay. Somebody said kids need to go back full time in person because I have to work. Okay. And they got so much hate online from people saying, you don't care about your children's safety. You are a terrible, I can't even repeat most of the comments that were on this one. All right. Okay. But before we pass judgment, and this is the key here, you can have your own personality, you can have your own beliefs, but I'm trying to get you to slow down just enough for us to be able to look at what is motivating this person. And then again, whatever your motivation is, if you want to change their mind, you can use this to do it. Okay. So keeping our triangle in mind, sorry, you can't see it because my face is in the way. Okay. Not wanting to send students back to keep them safe. Okay. Comes from what type of need? So the side here that's saying, you're a terrible parent, we want to keep our children safe. What level here is motivating that? Okay. Hopefully not getting sick, keeping them safe. It's a little bit of a trigger there. It's safety. Okay. So again, if we are being motivated by safety, that means that our physiological needs are being met. So those people who are able to sit in motivation by safety, okay, that means that they're good on the physiological and they are hyper-focused on the safety. And this is, it's very, very true. A lot of us let a lot of those top things go during this time because we were so focused on safety. That need wasn't being met for us. Okay, but let's look at the other side of this debate. Okay, the person that says children need to go back full time so I can work. What are they being motivated by? And again, it's not necessarily written out for you here, okay? But generally, people who are saying like they are desperate to go to work, it's not because they just miss their squishy corner office or their title, because most of those people were able to work from home. Okay. If someone is saying they cannot work unless their children go back to school, they're most likely going to be in some minimum wage jobs, in-person jobs, those types of things. And most likely that need is being motivated by a physiological need. They need to work in order to make enough money to feed those children and their family, and to be able to get water, and to be able to cover basic needs like hygiene and keeping a roof over their heads. Okay? So if we can, again, take the people out of it, take the controversy out of it, and just look at where these people are likely coming from. This person, their physiological needs are met, and they are very focused on safety, and they can't understand why somebody else wouldn't also be focused on safety. But this person most likely is focused on physiological. Okay? And what do we know about our Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, if the bottom tier is not met, they cannot think about or focus on anything above it. Okay, so this individual here, we always look who's on the bottom. Okay, who's at the bottom of the table. Okay, and we know, sorry about that, we know that physiological comes first. So this person, it's not to say that they don't care about their child's safety. What Maslow's hierarchy of needs is telling us is that their main focus and motivation has to be physiological. It's almost like saying it's a more important need, but I don't like that language, because they're honestly, the way Maslow's is worded is it's literally telling you that it's can't even come into the brain. Okay, because our brains are so focused on that bottom one that it's not something that can be a priority right now. Okay, and so again, we take that judgment out of it then. Okay, it's not that they don't care about safety, it's that their brains can't, because the physiological needs are not met. We have a huge part of our brain that is based out of our primitive years, and that is where the physiological comes from, that need to survive. And when that kicks in, okay, that's going to be very, very strong. All right, so this is a situation, or this is an example of a situation that we can look at in our everyday life and how Maslow's might have motivated our behavior. And I personally have found this really awesome when I've done some reflecting on things I've done in the past that I'm kind of a little bit confused about, or I have some regrets about, or which I've done differently, to be able to say, no, like, let's not have that judgment on ourselves as well as others, and knowing where we were at and what we were focusing on. I mentioned, however, that Maslow's is really, really important when we're talking about business leadership, okay? And so we're going to now frame it back that way. What does this look like in a business, okay? Again, as you learn about motivation, as you learn about business leadership, if you continue on into it, this is going to get more complex, but we're going to try to keep it a little bit simple right now. And again, we know that simplicity takes out that understanding that everybody's individual, but it just helps us start in our learning process, and then you can add back those complexity layers afterwards. Okay, so let's start at the bottom, because that's where we always start. We know we can't go up until these needs are met. Okay, so our physiological needs in a workplace, what this looks like is providing lunches and food, providing time to eat lunch and food, okay, having reasonable work hours, okay, having some physical comfort like temperature. Again, in a country like Canada, we get really hot summers. You're in a big welding industrial factory, installing air conditioning, okay, might help motivate our employees a little bit more, okay? Or more specifically, again, because meeting it doesn't motivate them, I shouldn't say that. If you don't have air conditioning and they're really hot, those employees might be motivated to get out of work as soon as possible and cool down. Whereas if you provided that air conditioning and work was comfortable, then they would be able to be motivated by other things, and they're not going to be motivated to get away from work as quickly as possible. Okay. And then, of course, enough money to be able to meet the physiological needs in their home or their family environment. Okay. So to be able to buy the food that they need for themselves and their family, to be able to put a roof over their heads, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. We often say that physiological needs are what motivates employees to come and work at a job. Okay. Especially unpleasant jobs. Okay, if you ever looked at, I know there used to be a TV show called like The Dirtiest Jobs, or you've heard somebody talking about, maybe anyways, I don't want to talk about jobs that you are like, oh, that's so repulsive. Okay. But people are willing to do them. And why are they willing to do them? Because it gets them a paycheck. And if you don't have a paycheck, if you are homeless or on the verge of being homeless and you don't have a way to feed yourself or your family, you're going to be willing to do just about anything to make that happen and to meet those physiological needs. Okay. So we have to acknowledge that almost every employee, if not every employee, works because they need to work to get the money to meet some of their needs. Okay. Even people that love their jobs like myself, we still kind of need that paycheck. And so we would be looking at it. So again, if you can recognize that there's employees in your business that are maybe doing behaviors that you don't love for your business, and you want to motivate them to be more focused on their work or more focused on other things, it's important that we make sure that their job and our business is meeting their physiological needs. Okay. So take a look at it. Okay. Is there a need to provide food? Because then that's not something that they need to be thinking about or motivating them. Okay. Lots of businesses, Google's a great example of it, said they brought really good food in and it's all provided because they don't want people leaving. They want to keep them in the building. And we know that a hungry stomach is going to motivate them to leave the building. Okay, so we can look at it that way. Okay, that ability to rest, that ability to be physically comfortable and to have those needs met. All right, assuming that these have all been met, we've done a great job of recognizing who needs them, getting them what they need to meet them. We know that this is no longer going to motivate them. Okay, it's going to make sure they're not unhappy, but it's not going to be the thing that's going to make them work really, really hard in our job. So let's look at the next level. Okay, what is going to then motivate them? They're going to be craving safety. Okay, that includes safety in their job. That includes physical safety in their working condition. That now very much includes mental safety in their work. Okay, and mental health. This could also include benefits, so the safety of like their medical conditions and be able to take care of themselves, as well as enough money to be able to meet their safety needs at home. Okay. This very much we often talk about is something that we can use to motivate people to change jobs. Okay, so again, their basic levels are met, generally lower level employees or people that are making kind of still hourly wages. Okay, at jobs X, Y, and Z, those physiological needs are all met. Okay, so they're not motivated by those anymore. So what can make us different? Well, we could possibly offer things that are going to satisfy this need for them. So physically, where is our workplace and does it feel safe for them? Okay, what type of contract are we willing to give them? Are we going to guarantee them their job? Okay, or are they going to continue to work on a temporary basis? What kind of health benefits do we give them, depending on where you live and how important that is? Okay, and so it can be from pay and it can be from other things that are there. Okay. A lot of times people assume that kind of the security measures in offices, especially when we have to go in, are in place for the security of the information that are there. And that is true. But there are individuals, and often given a past situation that has happened, that would honestly work at one place over another because of how hard it is for outside people to be able to access them, especially if their job feels unsafe. Okay. Also, if your job itself involves risk, okay, you're likely to crave jobs that are safer. Okay, and so again, we often see this in jobs that have that. So I know a lot of the workers at the daycare that my children go to used to be PSWs, personal support workers for children. But unfortunately, the nature of that job involves a lot of injury over time. And so at some point they were like, hey, these two jobs pay the same, but this one I'm not going to get hurt at work for. I'm going to change jobs. Okay, if that makes sense. But assuming we've met these safety needs, okay, we're then going to go up to our societal needs. Okay, so the safety needs are met, the physiological needs are met. We're now going to be motivated by a want for social connection. Okay, an employer can't control the level of social connection somebody has at home. However, they can control what it's going to be like at work, whether that's in person or virtual. Okay, one of them involves a competent boss. Okay, A lot of us don't think of a boss employee situation as being a social one, but it very, very much is. And if you are in constant miscommunication, if you are in constant unrest about knowing where you are at with your boss, if there's inconsistency, that is going to create tension in this level of social need, and that is going to then have to be craved elsewhere. Okay. Also, people crave to get along with coworkers. That doesn't mean you have to be besties with them, but there is a reason why there are memes left, right, and center across all the social media platforms right now about having your work, whatever you want to call it, wife or husband, or your work bestie, or whatever that is. Okay. Having a social connection at your job can often motivate people to stay far longer than they would have otherwise. Okay, and so this one, as I mentioned, is what's going to motivate employees to stay for the long term, that desire to continue to meet that need. And I know that I said we're always motivated by the deficit, but often what that looks like, it's because we have a social need that isn't being met in other areas of our life, and it is met when we come to work and those people that are there. All right. So as a side note, if you can meet your social needs outside of work, then you're going to not necessarily make job decisions and take less pay to be able to meet them at work. But that is often what happens. This can also come from interactions with customers or different people that you work with at your job, depending what that looks like. Okay. And, we've talked about it before with introverts. Sometimes it can be a little bit too much. But that's what we would be craving. And this is often when we see businesses have staff parties, staff socials. Everybody, let's go skating. Let's have a picnic. Let's do these things. Let's do a team building exercise. And yes, team building is important. We'll learn about it later in the course, but it's also in order to create these social connections that are there. I know a few people in very competitive fields that have chosen where they worked because of the social environment that existed at that job. They'd heard about the things that they do for family. They allow different things to happen. They run these events, and they were like, hey, if X and Y are paying me the exact same and all my other needs are met, yeah, let's go somewhere to meet those social needs. Okay. And so that can be highly motivated. But again, the key is those bottom ones have already been met. Okay. And this might be if you've ever been at a job or different places where a social's going on and there's that one person that's like, why do we have to waste our time doing this? Like, I could be doing my time better somewhere else, or this is so silly. It honestly likely is, that a lower need is not met for them. And so their brain is prioritizing that other thing. And this doesn't seem significant or important to them. And so they can't understand why other individuals might be wanting or craving this. Okay, if someone happens to have all of these things met, and I'm not saying that you need to, have a university degree or be at a high level job to do this. There is a lot of, bias and assumption that that is the case. Okay. Often because those jobs come with a higher pay, which can probably help out in a lot of those other areas. Okay. But again, if we've looked at those other ones, getting them to switch over to our company, meeting those social needs to get them to want to stay. Okay. Once those social needs are met, again, if you've done a great job of making social connections, they then need more, right? That's the deficit principle. They're then going to be looking for more. And this is where we get to our esteem needs. Okay. These are going to be things like promotion. It can involve pay, but it's often more about the title. Honestly, it's that recognition. It's having that title next to their name that boosts the ego. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that that's what they're craving. It could also just be more responsibility. Being trusted with more makes you feel like somebody's saying you've done a great job. And rewards from bosses along with saying you've done a good job, right? Putting their name on that paper that's being published that they contribute to, giving people the recognition that they deserve goes a really, really long way in this world. And in theory, it's free. Okay. And so again, recognizing when those employees have had those safety needs and all the other ones below met, that they're going to be motivated by these things, and more importantly, by the temptation of these things, the carrot of these things. Okay, so having it set up so that there's the possibility of a promotion in the future, that there's a title change in the future, that there's a corner office in the future. Again, that's the optics of being well respected, okay, is going to motivate somebody to be working harder at work. Okay, but again, they need those lower ones to always be met. Okay, and if you or someone you know happens to have all of those things and they've gotten all of the promotions and all of those needs are met, then they might possibly get to self-actualization, which means you have nothing left to motivate them with other than them finding interest in what they are doing. You letting them work on their own, you trusting them, you empowering them, you giving them that flexibility, giving them challenging work that they find interesting. Okay? But even if somebody does make it this high, you have to remember that if anything happens in their life, think of it like Jenga. If anything happens that takes out, all of a sudden a safety need is not met, all of a sudden a physiological need is not met, we drop all the way down to that being the focus. And this flexibility is not necessarily going to be the thing that's going to be motivating for them anymore. They're not going to be able to do it on their own. They're going to be hyper-focused on whatever it is that is missing. All right. So that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And our goal here is to understand it and then hopefully take it that step further and look at some specific situations and say, what is going to motivate these employees, and or oftentimes employees who have always done really, really well and all of a sudden aren't. This makes a great manager. All right, because it can be our instinct. I remember working one of my first jobs at, it was Sport Check at the time. I was a cashier there, and I now realize a phenomenal manager there. And there was an employee who was late 3 days in a row. And we all knew that if you were late 3 days in a row, you were going to get fired. All right. Or it was going to be like an official, wherever you're at, an official warning, a write-up, and then firing. Right. And so we're all gossiping like, oh my gosh, like they're going to get in trouble. They're going to be this, that, or the other thing. And I remember later hearing that manager, instead of going in and punishing them, went in and said, hey, you are a phenomenal employee. You have never been late before. So what has changed in your life that is causing you to be late now? Okay. And it turns out that somebody very important in their life was in the hospital. They were very, very sick. Okay. And so their entire focus had come crashing down the chart. Okay. And their concept of safety in their family, as well as basic physiological needs for somebody that's so close to them, was at risk. And so that esteem motivation of being a good employee and being recognized was no longer as significant to them. Okay. And that manager was phenomenal because they knew that punishing them was not going to change anything. This was their hyper focus. This is what they needed. And so they were able to work with them and say, okay, like, what is the schedule? When is visiting hours? They adjusted their shifts so that they were no longer in conflict. So that person wasn't picking between these two things that, I'm sorry, for most of us, that's not even a choice. And then they went back to being that great employee. Whereas if that manager had gone in and said, you're in trouble, I'm writing you up, but then they kept the same shift, they were going to be late again the next day because the only thing that their brain can focus on is where their family is at right now. So I hope that helps in your introduction to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I hope that you can apply it in your own life. Take a look at some of the situations going on around you and the decisions that people are making. And if you want to motivate someone to do something that benefits you, maybe this can help you do that. And we'll see you in the next one.